Why is discovery important? Conducting proper discovery tells you what you need to pitch. If you don't know, what are you going to appeal to? How are you going to sell them on something? How are you going to convince them that you can actually improve their life and increase their sense of well-being? There are probably 50 plus different ways to frame and explain your offering. There are a bunch of different benefits you can highlight and features you could focus on. How do you know what to choose? And this is really the problem if you don't do discovery. Most salespeople have one narrative that they always use to sell. They have one track or one focus worldview that they present their product through instead of tailoring that to the buyer. And their results end up being predictable. Is that their one narrative will hit home for the small percentage of people who align with that, and then everyone else doesn't buy because it didn't make sense to them. If you don't understand what makes your prospect tick, you'll only make a sale based on luck. So what the big difference maker is here is when you understand their motivations, what they would consider an increase in their well-being and their restraints on cost and their motivations, selling becomes simple. So what do we need to do to conduct proper discovery? We'll prepare the specific questions in a later module, but the discovery process is basically a series of questions that illuminates these things in a prospect's worlds. First, their why, so what they're trying to accomplish in the short term. Second, their current situation. Third, their pain points. Fourth, their ideal future state. And then last, why that ideal future state is important to them. So we need to understand their why, what they're trying to accomplish in the short term. Second, their current situation. So we've seen where they want to be. Now, where are they at right now? What's making that journey difficult? What are the roadblocks getting there? What is that ideal future state? We're going to revisit that a little bit, dig a little deeper, and get them a little emotionally involved in improvement and where they want to be, make them feel those feelings of their ideal state and get them excited about where they could be. And then we're going to get them to talk a little bit more about why that's important to them and really connect to their motivations and get under the surface a little bit. So as we're asking these discovery questions to get this information, this will let us know what we need to pitch. So when you properly can go through questions through that'll illuminate those 5 different things about a prospect, we'll know what to pitch and we'll know how to tailor our pitch. So how do we do discovery? How do you ask those perfect questions? You're going to prepare them and have a script. And we'll talk about the specifics about how to do that. This module is about principles and learning, not application. And I will give you a template with those questions that you can customize or just take straight out of the gate and use. But we're going to have prepared questions so we can really make sure we're going through each of those stages and uncovering the buyer's motivations. And I'll show you exactly how later. All right, so here are the questions I ask founders when we're going through the Startup Sales Accelerator and I'm talking to them. We're going through this discovery process. Say, what's the main thing that made you want to talk today? Get them talking a little bit about their goals. What have you been doing to grow sales? We get into their current situation a little bit. What roadblocks are you running into? So we start to talk about pain points. What's been the hardest part of that? So we dig a little deeper. You have to act like an investigative journalist and get a little bit below the surface here, really get them talking about the emotional state that they've been in and what it's like emotionally to be in their situation. And then we're going to ask more questions about creating sales process. So that's what I do. And for you, it's whatever you do. And we're going to get granular. So I'm going to ask them about CRM setup. I'm going to ask them about if they thought about hiring a rep. I'm going to ask them if they've hired reps before. I'm going to ask if they've figured out compensation plans. I'm going to talk about those common pain points with founders and understand their current situation and get them to talk a little bit about the things they don't know and understand the roadblocks of getting them to that next step. And then I say, hey, let's say I could help you figure out all this and we talk again in a year. Where would you feel satisfied with your sales organization a year from now? What would that look like? So I get them talking again about this ideal future state. I get them excited about where they could be. And then I say, hey, the answer to this might be obvious, but what makes those things important to you? And I talk about what they wanted to see in growth in the last year. Like, why would it be important for you to hit $1 million in annual run rate over the next year? What would that mean for you? What does that let you do? How does that change your life? And with these simple questions, this isn't anything complex. It's not hard, but with these simple questions, I can understand what's important to a founder. And then I can talk about the Startup Sales Accelerator in a way that will appeal to what's important to them and show to them that, hey, this product that I have will actually increase your well-being and get you the things that you want. So now you understand what the discovery process looks like and why it's so important. Without discovery, you can't pitch effectively. So now let's jump into pitching. So why do we need to understand pitching? Why can't we just say, here are the features, here are the benefits, do you want to buy? That's called transactional selling, by the way. We'll talk about it a little bit more in a future module. But like we said before, most salespeople aren't flexible when they're pitching. They have one narrative they go through. And when you can be flexible in pitching and you use the information you learned during discovery, you'll have better sales conversations and close more. Your conversions increase. So that's why understanding how to pitch is so important. It helps us close more customers. So what's the problem when you don't know how to pitch? If you pitch like most reps, your results will be unimpressive. You're using that one same narrative and it's not going to resonate with a lot of people. Prospects will most often be bored with your feature dumping. Like you're just talking about like, our product does this, our product does that, and it's things they don't actually care about. And people will be generally unresponsive and your closes won't connect. Like you'll try to say, hey, does it sound like something you want to move forward with? And like, no, not really. I didn't see the value. That sucks to hear when you're selling. So pitching, what do? How do we pitch effectively? So kind of like I've said before, pitching is pretty simple. After discovery, you present your product only in terms of their motivations. So we're going to understand what's important to them. And then the frame we use to talk about our product is only going to be in terms of their motivations. And it could be in the discovery process, you figure out I'm actually not a great fit. You just tell them you're not a great fit and move on to someone who is. So we want to present our product, talk about what we do only in terms of what's important to them. Don't mention other features or benefits. That's just going to be a distraction and it will actually make them feel like your product is irrelevant and won't actually help them. So only bring up features and benefits, aspects of what you sell that are relevant to the prospect. This takes discipline and this takes a high level of focus when pitching. It's easy to talk about. It's a lot more difficult in practice. And this is what makes sales science and an art. Like this is the science. The art is actually going out and applying this in conversations where you don't get to pause and think. You have to be on your feet and going, and you have to know what to say, and you have to interact with another human being. And that's where the difficulty comes in. Like I said before, sales is simple, but it's not easy. So during and after your pitch, we're also going to sprinkle in questions to build agreement on the benefits of working with you. So you're going to say, hey, does that sound like something that would help you meet X goal? Does that sound like it would help with this problem you were telling me about? And we're going to build that agreement. And you don't want to try to trap them into a yes. We're going to ask open questions that actually let them say no. My whole methodology around sales is I want to let people say no, because if I don't let people say no, people are going to hate working with me and they're going to churn. So people often say pitch benefits, not features. But even better than that is showing how you can help them enter into their ideal future state. We're going to talk about features and benefits, but only in the context that helps them get to that ideal future state that we were talking about in discovery. So how do we pitch? How can we actually pitch like this? Because you can't write a script for it. It's all going to be ad hoc as we're going through, and we're just going to custom tailor our pitch for every single person. So first off, we need a deep understanding of our product. We need to really understand what we can do to pitch like this. You can't have a transactional understanding of your product and your solution and expect to pitch in this highly consultative and transformational way. You also need to be really present during a sales conversation and know that you can't always rely on a script. You're going to need to be aware of what's happening. You can't just be thinking of the next thing you're going to say. You have to really be listening to them and then be responsive to that. So this will also mean that your pitches will be shorter, which is a really good thing. And your prospects will really appreciate this. Normally, if I had a canned sales pitch, that normally goes like 10, 15 minutes. When I'm pitching this way, I often find it's a lot simpler. And I only really dive into details when they have questions. And another principle in sales and just human interactions that people want to talk about themselves. They don't really want to hear you talk about yourself. As humans, we just tolerate that so we can talk about ourselves more afterwards, right? When you're in a social gathering, you're happy to listen to other people talk about themselves and what they're doing, as long as later on you'll be able to talk about yourself too. That's with most people. When we're with people we trust, we want to talk about what's important to us. We want to open up, be vulnerable, and have that experience. And we don't really want to hear others talk about themselves. It's just not that interesting to us. We'd much rather talk about our own lives. And so when your pitches are shorter, you're actually letting your prospects do this. In discovery, you just let them feel like they're important. You let them talk about themselves. And then when you pitch, it's short and sweet, and it's actually still all about them and their goals. So as far as pitching goes, now you know how to be flexible with your pitch and make sure you're appealing to your prospects' motivations. And now we'll round into the last lesson in part 1 of the startup sales strategy is closing. So after we've done effective pitching and discovery and pitching, we get into closing. So why do we need to talk about closing? When you stop trying to get people to do things they don't want to do and you stop making that great sales mistake, closing is actually simple. It's not hard. Understanding how to close will help you win more sales and avoid being off-putting to customers. That's probably the one thing I hate most about about how I used to sell is that I knew I was a nuisance to people and I didn't like that. So when you don't understand that closing actually isn't all that important in the sales process, you don't know what level of follow-up is actually appropriate. And most salespeople lean on the annoying, spammy side of that. Another really common piece of sales advice is manipulative closes. Like these were really common in the old sales books I read when I was just starting my career. It would be stupid things like saying to, if you're selling to a man and he's like, oh, I need to talk to my wife about it. Like one of the closes I remember is they would say like, well, then you ask, if he says, I have to talk to my wife about it, then you say, does your wife ask your permission to buy groceries? Like what a stupid and potentially offensive thing to say to someone. It's funny and silly, but that's not going to actually tip the scales of whether or not someone feels that their increase in well-being is profitable when they transact with you. That's not actually going to move the needle. The reason people say, I need to talk to other people, I need to think about it, is because they don't trust themselves to make spot decisions with a salesperson, because they know that salespeople can be emotionally manipulative and get them to buy into whatever they're selling, but they need to step back and think about it because they've made that mistake before. So a lot of people make closing out to be the most glamorous and important part of the sales process when it's really the exact opposite. Closing is the least important part. Proper closing is simple and it's just about aligning with your buyer. So what do we do in closing? So to close deals, and what I mean by closing, I probably should have let off with this. What I mean by closing is just getting someone to make a decision, tell you yes or no. That's all that closing is. It's not forcing someone to do yes. It's just getting them to tell you yes or no. No more maybes, no more waiting, no more thinking about it. So to close deals, you just coach your buyer through working with you. You coach them through the process and let them decide whether or not they want to move forward. Show them their next steps and help them take those steps. So here's the how. And this is my favorite method for closing. After I've pitched someone, I ask, does this sound like something you'd want to move forward with? I ask that open-ended question. And if they say no, I'll deal with their objections. We'll talk about them and we'll really see if there is value here for them or not. It could be that there's not. As a salesperson, you have to be open to that. And then, like I said, we want this question to be open. People deserve to be able to say no. I was interacting with a really big famous company in sales that their reps were hammering me, and I did a demo, and I was a one-man show at a small business. I was the only sales rep, and they wanted to sell me like $100,000 package to get their product. And they just kept hounding me. They wouldn't let me say no. And SDRs would get me on the phone. I'd be like, no, I'm too small. Like, we don't have $100,000. It's just me. They're like, but what if this could help you get $100,000 worth of deals? I'm like, but I'm doing 75% of this on my own. Yeah, your product will get me to 95%, but I'm already doing a lot of it on my own. And they wouldn't let me say no. And it's the most frustrating thing as a salesperson, because they're like, you're being unethical. You're trying to increase the cost of me not working with you, so that I'll just shut up and say yes. And that's not how we should be selling. I think there's a place for persistence if someone doesn't understand the value you could bring. But when they do, you cannot try to force them into a yes. That's one of the most toxic parts of sales and closing that I see. And then if someone says yes to that question, if I ask, hey, does this sound like something you'd want to move forward with? If they say yes, I'll explain, great, here are our next steps. What do you feel is the best next step? What do you want to do next? And I just let them decide. And they'll tell you, this is my timeline. This is what I want to do. And I'm just going to align with that. It's going to make my life easier. I'm not trying to force anyone into anything. And if I've done my job in discovery and pitching, people are going to say yes, and they'll want to move forward. And when people are convinced that something's going to be good for them, they take action on it, and you don't have to push them. And so here's the secret I've been talking about during this whole lesson, is that closing is the least important part of the sales process. If closing isn't working, it means that you didn't do your job in discovery and pitching. So now you understand how to close sales after you've properly done discovery in your pitch. This approach is something I really love because it takes the pressure out of sales and lets you just focus on helping others profit. Like I said before, sales is great because it's all about helping other people improve their lives.
All right. I don't think there's anything I would change from these lessons. So if you want to talk about how you're doing your discovery, how you're pitching, how you're closing, if you want to watch some recorded sales conversations with me and talk about how to improve things or work out your scripts, slides, anything around discovery, pitching, or closing, feel free to come book a one-on-one with me here at revliftoff.com. That's REVLIFTOFF.com. Scroll down to the how I can help section and book a one-on-one session with me for 30 or 60 minutes, and we'll work through applying this to your specific situation. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video.